Hey everyone, tonight we're diving headfirst into a period of history so chaotic, so filled with betrayal and bizarre twists, that it makes most modern political dramas look like a gentle sitcom. Imagine a country losing its entire ruling family, then suffering a climate change-induced famine, then being invaded, all while a parade of guys shows up claiming to be a long-dead prince. This is Russia at the turn of the 17th century, a dizzying 15-year-long national nightmare known as the Time of Troubles. You are there, in the middle of it all, where a loaf of bread could cost more than your house, and your neighbor might be an imposter, a bandit, or both. Frankly, with the odds of starvation, freezing, or being on the wrong side of a coup, you probably wouldn't survive this. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Let me know in the comments where you're listening from and what time it is for you. It's always fascinating to see where these stories land. Now dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. The air in Moscow is thin and sharp with the cold of January 1598. It is a cold that seeps through your boots, through the thick wool of your coat, and settles deep in your bones. You pull your collar tighter as you move through the crowded streets, the snow underfoot packed down into a slick, dirty ice. The usual city sounds are muted, replaced by a nervous quiet, the tolling of a single, mournful bell from the Kremlin's bell tower. It is a sound that confirms the rumors that have been skittering through the city's taverns and marketplaces for days. The Tsar is dead. This isn't just any Tsar. This is Fyodor Ivanovich, the last of his line. You stand for a moment, looking towards the imposing red walls of the Kremlin, the onion domes of its cathedrals dusted with fresh snow, looking more like gilded mushrooms than places of worship. Inside those walls, a dynasty that has ruled this land for over 700 years, a lineage stretching back to the legendary Viking chieftain Rurik, has just ended. It's like a great river suddenly running dry. The Rurikid dynasty is finished. You think back on Tsar Fyodor. He was never like his father, Ivan the Terrible, a man whose name still sends a shiver of dread through anyone old enough to remember his reign of paranoia and brutal purges. Fyodor was gentle, pious. He was known more for his quiet devotion and his almost childlike love for ringing church bells than for any act of statecraft. His critics, and there were many among the ambitious, hard-nosed boyars, called him the bell ringer, a simpleton unfit to wear the monomach's cap, the ancient crown of the Tsars. He would often travel the country not on state business, but simply to visit different monasteries and personally ring their bells, a strange hobby for the absolute ruler of a vast and growing empire. Yet, for all his simplicity, his reign had been one of relative peace, largely because he had the good sense to let his brilliant, calculating brother-in-law, Boris Godunov, handle the actual business of ruling. Now Fyodor is gone, dead at 40 with no son to succeed him. His only daughter had died in infancy. The throne of the Tsardom of Russia is empty. The silence in the city feels heavy, pregnant with 1,000 unspoken questions. Who will rule now? How is a new Tsar even chosen when the bloodline has failed? It's the 16th century equivalent of a company's entire board of directors and all its heirs vanishing overnight. There's no succession plan, no HR department for dynastic collapse. This crisis didn't exactly sneak up on everyone. The real seed of this disaster was planted 7 years earlier, in 1591, in the small town of Uglish. That's where Fyodor's much younger half-brother, the Tsarevich Dmitry, the last male Rurikid besides Fyodor himself, died under murky circumstances. The official story, the one pushed by Boris Godunov's commission of inquiry, was that the 8-year-old boy, who suffered from epilepsy, had a seizure while playing with a knife and accidentally pierced his own throat. A freak accident. But whispers have always persisted. Whispers of a different story of assassins sent to remove the boy who was a potential rival to Godunov's power. Historians still argue whether Dmitry's death was a tragic accident during an epileptic seizure or a calculated political assassination. It was a footnote then, a sad but politically convenient tragedy. Now, with Fyodor's death, That footnote has become the entire story. If Dmitry were alive, he would be Tsar, but he's not. Or is he? You see the powerful boyars moving through the city, their sleighs pulled by fine horses, their faces grim and unreadable behind their thick fur hats and beards. Men from the Shuisky clan, the Mstislavskis, the Romanovs, ancient families who see themselves as every bit the equal of the now extinct royal line. They smell a power vacuum, and each one believes he is the man to fill it. They are circling like wolves, waiting to see who will make the first move. And at the center of this web of intrigue is Boris Godunov. He was Fyodor's regent, his right-hand man, the true power behind the throne for over a decade. He has the experience, the intelligence, and the ambition, but he is not a Rurikid. He's of Tatar stock, a member of the service nobility, not the ancient bloodlines. Can a man like that truly become the Tsar, the little father of all Russia? It seems unthinkable. As the bell continues its slow, solemn toll, you can't shake the feeling that this is more than just the death of one man. It's the death of certainty itself. The stage is being set, the key players are taking their positions, and you're about to have a front row seat to the chaos that will swallow a nation. The tolling of the bell fades into the rhythm of a city holding its breath. In this moment of profound uncertainty, all eyes, whether in fear or in hope, turn to one man, Boris Godunov. You see him in your mind's eye, a man in his late 40s, powerfully built with a shrewd, calculating gaze that seems to miss nothing. He is not a prince of the blood. He doesn't have a drop of Rurikid lineage. His power comes from his mind, his sister's marriage to the late Tsar, and more than a decade of running the country from the shadows. He has proven himself a capable administrator, a clever diplomat, and a ruthless politician. He has brought a measure of stability and has even overseen the establishment of the Patriarchate of Moscow, giving the Russian Orthodox Church a leader equal in rank to those of the ancient Eastern churches, a massive prestige boost for the entire nation. Yet, to the ancient boyar clans, the Shuiskys and the Romanovs, he is an upstart, a pretender waiting for his chance. And now, that chance has arrived. The first move on this vast frozen chessboard is not Boris's, but his sister's. The now widowed Tsarina Irina is formally offered the throne. The Boyar Duma, the Council of Nobles, pleads with her to rule in her own right, to continue the line in some fashion. You watch this play out from the sidelines, a moment of high drama in the Kremlin's chambers. But Irina, coached by her brother or acting on her own shrewd instincts, refuses. In a display of pious grief, she announces her intention to withdraw from the world, to take the veil and live out her days as a nun in the Novodevichy convent just outside Moscow's walls. It's a brilliant, unexpected move. With her refusal, the last, thinnest link to the old dynasty is broken. There is now no one. And then Boris makes his move, a masterstroke of political theater. He too announces his withdrawal from public life. He will go with his sister to the convent, he declares, to mourn in seclusion. He abandons his opulent Kremlin apartments, leaving the government rudderless. The state is officially an orphan. The boyars are left staring at each other in the council rooms, a tangled mess of ambition and mutual suspicion, unable to agree on a single candidate from their own ranks. Boris has, in effect, engineered a crisis that only he can solve. He isn't seizing power. He's creating a vacuum that will pull him into it. It's the kind of power play that would earn a standing ovation in any modern boardroom. His closest ally, the man he helped install, Patriarch Job, now takes center stage. The Patriarch, his long white beard a symbol of his authority, declares that the nation cannot be without a father. He calls for a Zemsky Sobor, an assembly of the land, to be convened. This is Russia's version of a parliament, a gathering of clergy, nobles, merchants, and even some state peasants, called only in the gravest of national emergencies. Its purpose? To elect a new Tsar. On the surface, it's a gesture towards a national consensus. In reality, you know that Boris's agents have been working for weeks, ensuring the assembly is filled with delegates loyal to him. It's a 16th century masterclass in stacking the deck. The Sobor meets in February, and the outcome is a foregone conclusion. They overwhelmingly vote for the one man who has proven he can run the country, Boris Godunov. But the performance isn't over yet. He can't just accept. That would be too ambitious. So the theater continues. Patriarch Job leads a massive procession out of the Kremlin, crossing the frozen Moskva River to the Novodevichy convent. Thousands of Muscovites trail behind, carrying icons and crosses, their voices joined in a great chanting plea. You are swept along in the crowd, feeling the strange energy of orchestrated populism. They arrive at the convent walls and beg Boris to accept the throne, to save them from chaos. From a window, Boris refuses. He is unworthy, he says. The burden is too great. The crowd weeps and wails, begging him to reconsider. Patriarch Job threatens to excommunicate him if he refuses the will of the people. It's a scene worthy of an opera. They return the next day and the day after that. The pressure, both real and manufactured, builds. Finally, on the third day, his sister Irina blesses his ascent to the throne from within the convent. Boris appears before the pleading crowd, tears in his eyes, and humbly, reluctantly, accepts the crown he so masterfully maneuvered to win. A few weeks later, he is crowned in the Dormitian Cathedral in the Kremlin. You watch as the patriarch places the heavy, sable-trimmed monomaque's cap on his head, and he is anointed Tsar and autocrat of all Russia. He has done it. The upstart has become the supreme ruler, but as he stands there draped in gold brocade, you can see the stony-faced nobles in the crowd. They bow, but they do not forget. They see him not as a divinely appointed successor, but as an elected official, a man they put on the throne and, perhaps, a man they can one day remove. Historians still argue whether Boris Godunov was a visionary modernizer held back by circumstance, or a ruthless usurper whose reign was doomed from the start. For now, he is triumphant. He promises a reign of justice and prosperity, unaware that a volcano on the other side of the planet is about to make that promise impossible to keep. The first couple of years of Tsar Boris Godunov's reign are surprisingly calm. You feel a collective sigh of relief ripple across the land. The transition, for all its drama, has been bloodless. Boris is a firm and capable ruler. He pursues friendly relations with the West, encourages trade, and even sends a group of young nobles abroad to study in England and Germany, a radically forward-thinking idea for the time. He is intelligent, he is effective, and it seems for a moment that Russia has dodged a crisis, that competence might actually be a worthy substitute for royal blood. The whispers from the resentful boyar clans are still there, of course, but they are quiet, drowned out by the general sense of stability. You begin to think that perhaps this new era, the Godunov era, will be one of peace and progress. You are wrong. The real disaster isn't brewing in the secret council chambers of Moscow, but half a world away, in a place you couldn't even imagine. In February of 1600, on a continent that is little more than a rumor to you, a mountain in Peru named Huayna Putina explodes. It is one of the most violent volcanic eruptions in recorded history, a cataclysm that dwarfs almost anything in living memory. It blasts an immense plume of ash and sulfur dioxide more than 20 miles straight up into the stratosphere. Winds then carry the shimmering, sun-blocking veil of aerosols around the globe. You, of course, know nothing of this. You hear no sound, feel no tremor. All you know is that the summer of 1601 feels wrong. It begins subtly. The spring is cold and wet, delaying the planting season. But it's the summer that is truly unnerving. The sun, when you can see it through the persistent gray clouds, seems pale and distant, a silver coin in a dirty sky. Instead of warm, life-giving days, you get endless drizzle and a damp, penetrating chill. You see frost on the fields in late July. You huddle by a fire in what should be the height of August. The rye and oats, the staple crops that your life and the lives of everyone you know depend on, stand stunted and green in the waterlogged fields. They never ripen. The harvest is a catastrophic failure. Across the vast expanse of the Russian Tsardom, from the Polish border to the Ural Mountains, the same story unfolds. There is no grain. The initial response is concern, not panic. A bad harvest is something Russia has weathered before. There are reserves. But Tsar Boris, ever the proactive manager, steps in to control the situation. He forbids merchants from hoarding grain or speculating on prices, a sensible move. Then, in an act of what seems like great charity, he opens the imperial granaries and begins distributing free grain to the poor in Moscow. This, you will soon realize, is a terrible mistake. Word spreads like wildfire. There is free food in the capital. Soon, a flood of humanity begins to pour into the city. Tens of thousands of starving peasants abandon their villages and descend on Moscow, hoping for a handout from the Tsar. The city's resources are completely overwhelmed. It's the 17th century equivalent of a badly planned stimulus package. It creates a bigger problem than the one it was meant to solve. The food runs out almost immediately, and now you have a massive, starving, and desperate population concentrated in one place. As the brutal winter of 1601-1602 sets in, people survive on what little they have, their hopes pinned on the next harvest. Surely God wouldn't send 2 bad years in a row, but he does. The volcanic winter hasn't ended. The summer of 1602 is a grim repeat of the first. Again, the cold rains fall. Again, the crops fail. This time there are no reserves. The imperial granaries are empty. The last of the seed grain has been eaten. Now, the real panic begins. The price of bread skyrockets to more than 100 times its normal cost. People start eating whatever they can find: grass, tree bark, weeds. They call it bread, but it's just a gritty, foul-tasting paste that offers little nourishment. In the countryside and in the cities, you see the social order beginning to fray at the edges, but it's the political fallout that worries the men in power. The common people don't know about atmospheric aerosols. They know the language of faith and omen. A famine of this magnitude can only be a sign of one thing: God's wrath. And why would God be so angry? The answer is whispered in every marketplace and tavern. It's because of the Tsar. Boris Godunov is not a legitimate blue-blooded Rurikid. He is the usurper, the man whose reign began with the convenient death of the true heir, Dmitry. This famine, this endless winter, is divine punishment for his sin. Historians still argue whether any ruler could have survived the political fallout from the Great Famine, or if it was Boris Godunov's status as a usurper that made the disaster fatal to his reign. The natural disaster has become a supernatural curse, and Boris is the one being blamed. His competence, once his greatest asset, is now meaningless. You can't issue a decree against God's judgment. The stage is now set for a far deeper, more terrifying collapse. The political fallout is one thing, the human cost is another. You are now in the deep winter of 1602, the second year of the famine, and the word desperation is no longer strong enough for what you see. The social fabric of the Russian Tsardom is not just fraying, it is dissolving in a wash of ice and hunger. You walk through villages that are eerily silent, the houses shuttered, the streets empty save for a few skeletal figures huddled in rags. The fields, which should be sleeping under a clean blanket of snow, are instead littered with the frozen, unharvested stalks of last summer's failed crops. The roads are the only places with any life, and it is a terrifying kind of life. A slow, shambling exodus of the starving, moving without hope or destination, their faces etched with a hollowness that goes beyond simple hunger. Normalcy is a distant memory. The bonds of family and community, the very bedrock of society, have crumbled. You hear stories, and then you see the evidence of parents abandoning their children, of children turning on their elderly parents. There is no charity left. Every man, woman, and child is for themselves. To be weak is to be a victim. To have a crust of bread is to be a target. Social distancing becomes the new norm, not out of fear of disease, but out of a primal fear of your fellow man. And then there is the banditry. This isn't the work of a few lone highwaymen. This is organized chaos. Vast swathes of the countryside are now controlled by enormous gangs of desperate peasants and escaped serfs. One of the most notorious is a man named Klopko Kosalap. He gathers an army of hundreds, maybe thousands of starving, furious men. They are not just robbing travelers, they are sacking estates, burning manor houses, and killing landowners. They are a law unto themselves. When Tsar Boris sends a force of soldiers to deal with them, Klopko's bandit army actually stands and fights, defeating the Tsar's troops in a pitched battle just outside Moscow. It takes a second, much larger army to finally crush the rebellion and kill its leader. This isn't just crime anymore, it's a full-blown peasant war, a civil war born from empty stomachs. In the cities, the horror is more intimate. You learn to lock your door at night not just to protect your property, but to protect yourself. The ultimate taboo, the one that separates man from beast, is broken. At first, it's just whispers. Rumors of pies being sold in the market with a strange, sweet-tasting meat. Of lone travelers disappearing from inns. Then it becomes more open. A grim reality spoken of in hushed tones. People are eating the dead. And sometimes, they are not waiting for the dead to die on their own. The farm-to-table movement has taken a very, very dark turn. It's a level of depravity that poisons the very soul of the nation, leaving a stain of collective trauma that will last for generations. Amidst the horror, the world takes on a surreal, almost supernatural quality. With the known world turned upside down, people start seeing signs and portents everywhere. You hear tales of ghostly armies clashing in the night sky, of crosses appearing on the moon, of animals behaving strangely. It all feeds the narrative that this is not a natural disaster, but a divine reckoning. Historians still argue whether the extreme social collapse was a direct result of the famine alone, or if it was accelerated by the underlying weakness of a state ruled by a czar without hereditary legitimacy. Boris Godunov is a ruler in name only. His decrees are useless, his soldiers are fighting his own people, and his legitimacy is in tatters. He is utterly powerless to stop the collapse. The kingdom is a corpse, laid out and waiting for a final blow. The people are not just hungry for bread, they are hungry for a miracle. They are desperate for a savior, for someone to deliver them from this living nightmare. They cling to the idea that there has to be a reason for their suffering. And the easiest reason is that the man on the throne is illegitimate. If only the true Tsar, a rightful heir of the sacred Rurikid blood, would return, surely God's favor would be restored. The rains would stop, the sun would shine, and the fields would be fertile again. It's a fantasy, a desperate dream. But in a country unmoored from reality, a dream can be a powerful and dangerous thing. And far to the west, in the Polish-Lithuanian Commonwealth, someone is listening. Someone is about to turn that dream into a weapon. The dream of a savior, born from the depths of despair, begins to take on a name. At first, it's just a whisper, a ghost of a story carried on the wind. You hear it from a traveling merchant who's just come from the western borderlands, or from a grizzled Cossack passing through on his way south. The story is always the same. A fantastic tale that sounds like something a minstrel would sing. The Tsarevich Dmitry, even the terrible's youngest son, the boy who supposedly died in Uglich all those years ago, is alive. The story goes that loyal followers, fearing for his life under Boris Godunov's regency, smuggled the real prince away and left the body of another boy in his place. He was raised in secret, in a monastery, waiting for the right moment to reclaim his birthright. And now, as a young man in his early 20s, he has emerged from the shadows. He has revealed himself in the vast, powerful, and often troublesome kingdom to the west, the Polish-Lithuanian Commonwealth. To your modern ears, it sounds absurd, a conspiracy theory of the highest order. But you are not in the modern world. You are in a land that has been bludgeoned by God for 3 straight years. A land where the natural order has been inverted and the impossible seems to happen every day. In this context, the story isn't just plausible, it's a lifeline. It makes perfect, terrifying sense. The famine isn't a random weather event, it's the lament of the land itself, crying out for its true master. This is why God is angry. This is why the sun has hidden its face. The return of the rightful Tsar is the only thing that can heal the nation, the only thing that can make the crops grow again. It's the ultimate get-out-of-jail-free card for a country trapped in a prison of starvation. In the Kremlin, Tsar Boris Godunov hears the same whispers and he is not amused. At first he dismisses it as the babbling of starving peasants, but the rumor doesn't die. It grows, spreading from village to village, taking root in the fertile soil of misery. Boris, the master politician, understands the existential threat this poses. His entire claim to the throne rests on the fact that the Rurikid line is extinct. If a male heir exists, Boris is nothing but a usurper. He launches what you might call a 17th century public relations counteroffensive. He orders priests in every church to read from the official report on the Uglich incident, detailing the boy's accidental death. He parades Dmitry's mother, the nun Marfa, before church officials to have her publicly attest once again that her son is dead and buried. His final, most dramatic move is to have the boy's grave in Uglich opened. The remains are exhumed and brought to Moscow. Boris arranges for the Orthodox Church to canonize the dead child as a holy martyr, Saint Dmitry of Uglich. The tiny coffin is placed in the Archangel Cathedral, the burial place of Tsars, turning the boy into a holy relic. Surely, Boris thinks, this will put the matter to rest, but it has the opposite effect. His frantic, desperate efforts to prove Dmitry is dead only make people more suspicious. It's the Streisand effect, 4 centuries early. Why, people ask, is the Tsar trying so hard to convince us the boy is dead unless he has a terrible fear that he is in fact alive? It looks like a cover-up. Every proclamation from the Kremlin intended to kill the rumor only serves as fertilizer for it. Meanwhile, the story continues to emanate from Poland-Lithuania, Russia's great rival. The Commonwealth is the perfect incubator for such a plot. It's a massive, multi-ethnic state, a boisterous and decentralized elective monarchy where the king is often weaker than his most powerful nobles. This nobility, the Slakta, are a unique breed, fiercely independent, obsessed with glory, and always on the lookout for a grand, romantic, and potentially profitable adventure. They're basically the venture capitalists of 17th century regime change. The idea of backing a pretender to the Russian throne, of destabilizing their powerful eastern neighbor and maybe carving off a piece of it for themselves, is exactly the kind of high-stakes gamble that would appeal to them. And so, the whisper solidifies. It is no longer just a story. There is a man, a specific, charismatic young man, currently living on the estate of a powerful Polish magnate who claims to be the lost Tsarevich. Historians still argue about who the man claiming to be Dmitry actually was, with theories ranging from a runaway monk named Grigory Otrepyev to an illegitimate son of a Polish king, or even a complete unknown. But to you and to millions of Russians, his true identity is irrelevant. What matters is the hope he represents. The whisper is becoming a voice, and that voice is about to start raising an army. By 1604, the worst of the famine is finally over. The rains have subsided, the sun has returned, and a meager harvest has been brought in. But the country you're standing in is a shadow of its former self. It is a land of ghost towns, fallow fields, and mass graves. The psychological scars run deep, and the political situation is a tinderbox waiting for a spark. That spark is about to cross the western border. The whispers have become a man, and that man now has an army. You are now watching the drama unfold on the estate of a powerful Polish magnate. A young man, barely in his 20s, has stepped out of the shadows. He calls himself Dmitry Ivanovich, Tsarevich of Russia. He is surprisingly convincing. He has an air of natural authority, speaks with intelligence, and possesses a fiery charisma that draws people in. He even looks the part, with reddish hair and a couple of facial warts that, by a staggering coincidence, match the descriptions of the young prince who died in Uglich. He is an expert horseman and has an uncanny grasp of Russian court politics and theology. He tells a spellbinding story of being spirited away from his would-be assassins, of a life spent in hiding in monasteries, and of a divine providence that has preserved him to reclaim his father's throne. His big break comes when he wins the patronage of Jerzy Mniszek, the voivode of Sandomierz. Mniszek is a powerful and influential noble, but he's also deeply in debt. In Dmitry, he doesn't just see a prince, he sees a solution to his financial problems. A deal, one of the most audacious in history, is struck. Mniszek will use his influence and resources to help Dmitry raise an army. In return, once Dmitry is Tsar, he will marry Mniszek's beautiful, fiercely ambitious daughter, Marina. The bride-to-be comes with quite the price tag. Dmitry promises his future father-in-law 1,000,000 zlotys, plus the deeds to the vast and wealthy northern Russian territories of Pskov and Novgorod. It's like getting a kingdom as a wedding gift. This isn't the only dangerous promise he makes. In his quest for backers, Dmitry also secretly converts to Roman Catholicism and meets with the Pope's ambassador. He gives his solemn vow that, as Tsar, he will bring the entire Russian Tsardom into the Catholic fold. To the Orthodox believers he hopes to rule, this would be an act of apocalyptic betrayal, but to the zealous Polish Catholics and the Vatican, it makes him an irresistible investment. He's putting together his invasion like a modern startup founder, promising massive equity and a pivot in the company's core mission to anyone willing to fund his first round. The Polish king Sigismund III Vasa plays his part perfectly. Officially, he declares the matter an internal Russian affair and offers no state support. Unofficially, he gives Dmitry an audience, offers him a pension, and turns a blind eye as his nobles flock to the pretender's cause. It's a masterful bit of plausible deniability. If Dmitry succeeds, Poland has a friendly puppet on the Russian throne. If he fails, the Polish crown has clean hands. So, the army comes together. It's a private enterprise, a motley collection of soldiers of fortune. There are about 1,500 Polish light cavalry, the famous winged hussars, looking for glory. A few hundred German mercenaries who will fight for anyone who pays, and a contingent of Russian exiles who genuinely believe Dmitry is their savior. They are joined by thousands of Don Cossacks, the fiercely independent frontiersmen who are always ready for a fight, especially one that promises plunder and a chance to defy the authorities in Moscow. It is not a large army, but it is fast, experienced, and fueled by a powerful idea. In the autumn of 1604, this small force crosses the Dnieper River and enters the Russian Tsardom. Dmitry's real weapon isn't the lances of his Polish cavalry, but the letters he sends ahead of his army. They are masterful works of propaganda, addressed to the commanders and citizens of every town in his path. He proclaims himself Dmitry, their God-given, miraculously preserved sovereign, come to deliver them from the usurper and tyrant Boris. And in a country that has been taught to believe it is being punished by God for that very usurpation, these letters fall like seeds on the most fertile ground imaginable. Historians still argue whether Dmitry genuinely believed his own story, suffering from a form of royal delusion, or if he was a brilliant and cynical actor who knew exactly what he was doing. Either way, the ghost of Uglich is no longer a rumor. He is a physical presence marching east, and the time of troubles is about to enter its next bloody chapter. As Dmitry's small army pushes into the southern borderlands, the response is not what Tsar Boris might have hoped for. This region, populated by Cossacks and disgruntled minor nobles, has always chafed under Moscow's heavy hand. For them, Dmitry isn't a threat. He's an opportunity. Town after town, Moravsk, Chernigov, Putyvl, opens its gates to the pretender, not out of love for him but out of hatred for Boris. The letters and proclamations have done their work. You watch as Dmitry's military force, small as it is, becomes the core of a growing popular rebellion. It seems the whole south of the country is peeling away from Moscow's control. In the Kremlin, Boris Godunov, ever the strategist, doesn't panic. He assembles the main imperial army, a large, well-equipped force, and sends it south under the command of his most trusted generals, including the wily and high-born Prince Vasily Shuisky. In January of 1605, at the Battle of Dobranichi, the two armies meet. The result is a complete rout. The Tsar's professional army, with its superior artillery and numbers, annihilates Dmitry's rebel force. The Polish mercenaries are scattered, the Cossacks flee, and Dmitry himself is nearly killed or captured, escaping by the skin of his teeth. His army is shattered, he is a fugitive, his grand invasion a failure. This, by all rights, should be the end of the story. The pretender has been defeated. The usurper has won. But history, especially during the time of troubles, rarely follows a logical script. Back in Moscow, just 3 months after this decisive victory, you find yourself witnessing one of the most sudden and dramatic turning points in this entire saga. On April 13, 1605, Tsar Boris Godunov is hosting a dinner for foreign envoys in the Kremlin. He is at the height of his power, his enemy defeated, his throne seemingly secure. He is reportedly in good spirits, jovial and confident. Then, in the middle of the meal, he rises from the table claiming to feel dizzy. Within minutes, the situation becomes horrific. Blood begins to pour from his nose, his mouth, his ears. He collapses, racked by convulsions, and 2 hours later, the man who outmaneuvered every rival to win the Russian crown is dead. The official cause is given as apoplexy, a massive stroke, but no one believes it. The timing is too perfect, the death too convenient. The air in Moscow thickens with rumors of poison. Had one of the boyar clans, the ones who always saw him as an upstart, finally found a way to remove him? Or had Boris, in a moment of despair perhaps brought on by the stress of the rebellion and the lingering guilt of his own bloody path to power, taken his own life? Historians still argue about the true cause of Boris Godunov's death, with theories ranging from a legitimate stroke to a sophisticated poisoning by his boyar rivals, or even a despair-induced suicide. Whatever the truth, the effect is the same. The one man holding the state together is gone. In his place, the throne passes to his 16-year-old son, Fyodor II. By all accounts, the young man is a prodigy. He's intelligent, physically powerful, and remarkably well-educated for the time. He's even credited with producing the first-ever native-drawn map of Russia. Under normal circumstances, he might have been one of Russia's great rulers. But these are not normal circumstances. He inherits a kingdom at war, a treasury drained by famine and rebellion, and a populace that believes his entire family line is cursed. His reign, you sense, is going to be the shortest and least enjoyable internship in history. The death of Boris is the signal the army in the field has been waiting for. The generals, including the previously loyal Pyotr Basmanov, take stock of the situation. Do they remain loyal to a teenage boy in Moscow whom everyone despises, or do they join the man the people are hailing as the true Tsar? It's not a difficult choice. The loyalty of the Russian army proves to have the shelf life of fresh milk. In an astonishing act of treachery, the very commanders who had crushed Dmitry at Dobrynitsy now switch their allegiance. They murder the few generals who object and declare their support for the pretender. The imperial army, the only thing standing between Dmitry and the throne, now becomes his own force. The defeated fugitive, by a stunning twist of fate, is now marching on Moscow at the head of the most powerful army in the land, and the boy Tsar Fyodor is a lamb waiting for the slaughter. You are now marching north, part of a strange and miraculous army. Just a few weeks ago, this was a defeated rabble. Now, it is the instrument of destiny. You watch as the man calling himself Dmitry, the fugitive of Dobrynitsy, rides triumphantly into the camp of the imperial army that was sent to destroy him. He is welcomed as a hero, a savior. The soldiers who were recently firing cannons at him now cheer his name and kiss the cross, swearing allegiance to him as their one true Tsar. It's a breathtaking display of political whiplash. The opportunism is so thick you could cut it with a knife. The march on Moscow is less of a military campaign and more of a victory parade. As you move through the countryside, the army swells in size. Peasants who see Dmitry as the messiah who will end their suffering and abolish serfdom flock to his banner. Townspeople and minor gentry, eager to be on the winning side, ride out to join the procession. At every city you are greeted not with cannon fire but with the traditional offering of bread and salt. The bells of the churches ring out in welcome. You are part of a popular revolution, a tidal wave of hope and hysteria rolling inexorably towards a panicked and leaderless capital. In Moscow, the news of the army's defection causes a complete meltdown. The city is a powder keg. The boy Tsar Fyodor II and his mother are isolated in the Kremlin, surrounded by boyars who are experts at pivoting their core loyalties. The Duma is in chaos, with nobles openly debating whether to resist or to welcome the advancing Tsarevich. The final act begins when Dmitry's envoys boldly ride into Moscow. They are not arrested. Instead, they are allowed to ride into Red Square, where a vast and agitated crowd has gathered. One of the envoys climbs the rostrum and reads a proclamation from Dmitry, promising justice and grace to all who accept him, and doom for the Godunov usurpers. He finishes by asking the crowd a simple question: do you accept the true Tsarevich Dmitry as your rightful Tsar? The square explodes in a single deafening roar of affirmation. It is the spark the boyars have been waiting for. They have skillfully fanned the flames of popular discontent, and now they direct the fire. A massive riot erupts. The crowd, a mix of genuinely furious citizens and agents of the nobility, surges towards the Kremlin. They are not just a mob, they are an instrument of a coup. They swarm through the gates, ransacking the homes and offices of Godunov loyalists. The government of Fyodor Tsars simply ceases to exist. Within hours, the young Tsar, his mother Maria, and his sister Ksenia are formally arrested by the very nobles who had sworn oaths of loyalty to them just weeks before. Their fate is grim and swift. They are held for about 10 days while the final arrangements are made. Then, on June 10th, a delegation of princes, including Vasily Golitsyn and Vasily Mosalsky, goes to the chambers where the royal family is imprisoned. What happens next is brutal. The 16-year-old Fyodor, a boy of great physical strength, fights desperately for his life, but he is overwhelmed and strangled, along with his mother. The official cause of death is announced as suicide by poison. It's a lie so transparent it's almost insulting. The bodies, when briefly displayed, show clear marks of a violent struggle, which is an odd side effect of poisoning. Fyodor's sister Ksenia is spared, her fate arguably worse. She is kept alive to be raped and used as a concubine by the victorious pretender. 10 days later, on June 20th, 1605, you witness the grand finale. The first false Dmitry enters Moscow in triumph. It is a spectacle of the highest order. He is met by a procession of clergy holding aloft shimmering icons. The city's bells peal in celebration. The crowds weep with joy, throwing themselves to the ground as he passes, hailing him as their miraculous savior, their little father returned from the dead. And bowing lowest of all are the great boyars, the very men who just murdered the previous occupants of the throne. Historians still argue whether the Muscovite popular uprising was a spontaneous explosion of rage against the Godunovs, or a carefully orchestrated coup d'etat, manipulated from the start by the elite boyar clans. As Dmitry rides through the Spassky Gate into the Kremlin, you can't help but marvel at the scene. A year ago, he was an unknown with a crazy story. Now he sits on the throne of Ivan the Terrible. He has won. The fairy tale is complete. But as you watch him, you notice he is surrounded by the smiling faces of wolves. For a brief, shining moment, it seems the fairy tale has come true. Tsar Dmitry I, as he is now known, sits on the throne. His first acts are popular. He visits monasteries, pays his respects at the tombs of the previous Tsars, and increases the pay for soldiers and civil servants. But he knows his position is fragile. He needs one final, unassailable piece of proof to cement his legitimacy. He needs his mother's blessing. So he arranges for Maria Nagaya, the last wife of Ivan the Terrible, who had been exiled to a convent by Boris Godunov, to be brought to Moscow. You are in the massive crowd that gathers to watch their reunion. It's a moment of pure political theater. The old Tsarina, now the nun Marfa, is led out. She sees the young man on the throne. There is a dramatic pause. Then, she breaks down in tears and publicly embraces him, proclaiming to all of Moscow that this is, indeed, her miraculously returned son. The crowd erupts. For the common person, this is the final seal of approval. The case is closed. The true Tsar has been recognized by his own mother. With this endorsement, Dmitry's confidence soars. And that's when the problems begin. He doesn't act like a Russian Tsar. The rulers you are used to are remote, semi-divine figures, wrapped in layers of ancient ritual and orthodox piety. Dmitry is different. He's energetic, informal, and impatient. He scoffs at the rigid court traditions he finds suffocating. He refuses to take the customary post-dinner nap, a practice so ingrained in court life that it baffles the boyars. He often walks out into the city with only a small guard, shocking everyone by speaking directly with merchants and artisans. To him, this might be a kingly act of connecting with his people. To the Russian elite, it is undignified and bizarre. His personal habits become symbols of his alien nature. He prefers Polish dress to the heavy, brocaded robes of his predecessors. His personal bodyguard is made up of German and Polish mercenaries, not Russians. And then there's the matter of his dining habits. You watch, along with the scandalized nobles at a court banquet, as the new Tsar eats his meals with a two-pronged fork. In early 17th century Moscow, forks are an unheard of and deeply suspicious foreign novelty. The boyars use spoons and knives. A fork, with its sharp tines, seems to them like a miniature version of the devil's pitchfork. It's a small thing, but it becomes a potent metaphor. This man with his strange tools and stranger habits is not one of them. Worse than his personal quirks is his entourage. His court is filled with the Poles and Lithuanians who backed his invasion. They are loud, arrogant, and they treat Moscow like a conquered city. You see them swaggering through the streets, openly mocking Russian customs, brawling in taverns, and most offensively, showing disrespect for Orthodox churches. They are Catholics, Latins, and in the deeply pious heart of Russia, they are viewed as heretics. Dmitry protects them, dismisses complaints against them, and continues to surround himself with them, creating a dangerous rift between himself and the people he rules. His Polish entourage is getting the worst Yelp reviews in the city's history. Meanwhile, the boyars, led by the ever-scheming Vasily Shuisky, are watching all of this with keen interest. They use Dmitry to oust the Godunovs, but they have no intention of being ruled by a Polish puppet. Shuisky's resume of loyalty is a masterpiece of flexibility. He confirmed Dmitry's death, then fought against him, then swore allegiance to him, and is now quietly plotting his overthrow. The pretender's foreign ways and the unpopularity of his friends are the perfect justification for a new conspiracy. Historians still argue whether Dmitry's un-Russian behavior was a calculated attempt to modernize a stuffy court, or simply the naive actions of a young man unfamiliar with the rigid expectations of a Muscovite Tsar. He is a man caught between worlds. He cannot deliver on his secret promises to make Russia Catholic, nor can he give away huge territories to his Polish father-in-law. His backers are growing impatient, and his new subjects are growing resentful. The stage is being set for another bloody confrontation, and the catalyst is to be the grandest celebration of all: his wedding. In early May of 1606, the source of all the simmering tension arrives in Moscow. Marina Mnisek, the pretender's Polish bride, makes her grand entrance. It is less a bridal procession and more a military occupation. She is accompanied by her father and a massive entourage of some 2,000 Polish nobles, retainers, and soldiers. You watch from the crowded streets as they ride in, a vibrant, arrogant, and utterly alien presence. They are loud, heavily armed, and they carry themselves with the swagger of conquerors. They are billeted in the homes of Muscovites, where their behavior does nothing to endear them to the locals. The city, already on edge, begins to feel like a lit fuse. The wedding ceremony itself, held on May 8th, is a masterclass in cultural insensitivity. It's a series of shocks to the system of Orthodox tradition. First, in a bizarre and unprecedented move, Dmitry has Marina crowned and anointed as Tsarina before the wedding, an honor reserved for the wives of established rulers, not brides-to-be. The real bombshell, however, is that Marina, a staunch Catholic, flatly refuses to convert to Russian Orthodoxy. For a Russian Tsarina, this is not just a deal-breaker, it's an act of sacrilege. A clumsy compromise is reached where she partakes in an Orthodox communion ritual, without actually renouncing her faith, a theological loophole that fools no one and deeply offends the powerful church patriarch. The wedding feast is no better, a raucous affair with Polish music and dancing that leaves the attending Russian boyars feeling like strangers in their own court. This is the moment Vasily Shuisky has been waiting for. The master conspirator, who has been quietly fanning the flames of xenophobia and religious outrage for months, now puts his plan into motion. You can imagine his agents moving silently through the city's markets and barracks, whispering their poison. The Tsar, they say, is a fraud, a heretic sorcerer. He and his Polish bride plan to kill the leading boyars, tear down the Orthodox churches, and build Catholic cathedrals in their place. The thousands of armed Poles in the city are not wedding guests. They are an occupying army waiting for the signal to strike. The plan is simple: to use the city Rage as a battering ram to break down the Kremlin gates and seize the throne. The signal is the ringing of the great alarm bell. In the cold pre-dawn darkness of May 17th, less than 10 days after the wedding, the bell begins its frantic, clanging toll. You are jolted from your sleep by the sound and by the growing roar from the streets. Shouts echo through the alleys. The Poles are killing the boyars. To the Kremlin, save Orthodoxy. Vasily Shuisky and other nobles, swords drawn, ride into Red Square, whipping the gathering mob into a frenzy. They point to the Kremlin and scream that the time has come to kill the impostor and his heretic followers. The very same populace that had wept with joy at Dmitrius' arrival, less than a year before now turns on him with murderous intent. A horrific citywide pogrom against the Poles erupts. Mobs, led by Shoisky's men, hunt them down in the streets, dragging them from the houses where they are staying. Hundreds are slaughtered. Meanwhile, the main force storms the Kremlin gates. The palace guards, the Streltsy, offer only token resistance before joining the rebels. Dmitry is awakened by the sounds of chaos. He tries to rally his personal guard, but it's too late. As the mob breaks down the doors to his chambers, he makes a desperate escape, running through the palace corridors until he reaches a high window. He jumps. He survives the 30-foot drop into a courtyard, but his leg is badly broken. He lies there, helpless, and is found by a patrol of the Streltsy. For a moment, his fate hangs in the balance. Some of the guards, still half believing he might be the true heir, form a protective circle around him. To settle the matter, they send for the one person who can give a final, definitive answer. His mother, the nun Marfa. She is brought into the courtyard and placed before the broken, bleeding man. "Is this your son?" they demand. In that moment, with the lives of everyone in the balance, she looks at the man she had publicly embraced and disavows him. "No," she is said to have declared, "he is not her son." That is the death sentence. The guards step aside. The mob falls upon Dmitry, hacking and stabbing him to death. His brief, impossible reign is over. His body is mutilated and put on display in Red Square before being burned. In a final, grimly symbolic act, his ashes are mixed with gunpowder and fired from a cannon, aimed west, in the direction of Poland. The smoke, both literal and metaphorical, clears over Moscow to reveal a scene of grim satisfaction for some and profound uncertainty for all. The impostor has been killed, his ashes fired from a cannon. His Polish entourage has been slaughtered. The throne is empty. For the architect of this bloody coup, Vasily Shoisky, the moment to claim his prize has arrived. There is no pretense of a national consensus this time, no calling of a great Zemsky Sobor. That would take too long, and the outcome would be uncertain. Instead, you witness a raw and cynical power grab. Just 2 days after the murder, Shoisky's supporters pack Red Square with a loyal crowd of Muscovites. At the appointed moment, they begin to chant his name, proclaiming him the new Tsar. Shoisky, with a practiced show of reluctance, accepts. It is not an election, it is an acclamation by a hand-picked faction. He will forever be known as the Boyar Tsar, a ruler chosen by and for the Moscow elite. You look upon this new sovereign, Tsar Vasily IV. He is a man in his 50s, from a princely line even more ancient than the defunct Rurikids, a descendant of the princes of Suzdal. He is shrewd, experienced in court intrigue, and utterly without charisma. He is a creature of the back room, not the public square. His claim to the throne is based entirely on the support of the other great boyar families, and they make him pay a price for it. In a truly revolutionary act for Russia, he is forced to swear a formal oath, kissing the cross that he will not rule as a complete autocrat. He promises not to execute any member of the boyar class, nor to confiscate their lands, without a full trial by their peers in the Boyar Duma. It's the first time a Tsar has ever had to agree to terms and conditions, a sign of just how weak his position truly is. His problems begin immediately. While the Moscow elite may have accepted him, the rest of the country feels differently. In the southern provinces, the very regions that had so enthusiastically supported the man they believed was Dmitry, Shoisky is seen as nothing more than a murderer and a usurper. And then, a new rumor begins to snake its way through the traumatized land, a rumor that demonstrates the sheer unkillable power of the Dmitry myth. The story goes that the boyars, in their haste, killed the wrong man. The real Tsar Dmitry, blessed by God with an almost comical talent for survival, had escaped yet again, and some unfortunate foreigner was killed in his place. The Dmitry story now officially has sequel potential. This new rumor becomes the ideological banner for a massive new rebellion. The city of Putivl, under its firebrand governor Prince Shakovskoy, refuses to swear allegiance to Shuisky, and declares itself the capital of the territory loyal to the true Tsar Dmitry. But this new rebellion needs a military commander, a charismatic leader to unite the disparate forces of Cossacks, minor gentry, and angry peasants. They find him in a man with one of the most incredible backstories of the entire era, Ivan Bolotnikov. You can almost picture him, a man forged in hardship and burning with resentment. Bolotnikov was a Kolop, a military slave, in the service of a Russian prince. His life was a brutal odyssey. He was captured in battle by the Crimean Tatars, sold on the slave market to the Ottoman Turks, and forced to spend years chained to an oar as a galley slave in the Turkish fleet. He only gained his freedom when his galley was sunk in a naval battle with Christian forces. From there, he made his way through Europe, Venice, Germany, Poland, intending to find his way home. When he arrived on the Polish-Russian frontier, he walked straight into the brewing rebellion. He was a natural leader, tough, fearless, and filled with a burning hatred for the boyar aristocracy that had enslaved him. He claims to have met the real Dmitry abroad, and is promptly named the chief general, voivoda, of the rebellion's army. Historians still argue about the nature of Shuisky's accession oath. Was it a cynical ploy to placate his rivals, or a genuine, groundbreaking attempt to introduce a form of constitutional monarchy to Russia? It hardly matters now. Tsar Vasily sits uneasily on his throne in Moscow, while a full-scale civil war, a violent social revolution led by an escaped galley slave fighting in the name of a ghost, is about to engulf the entire kingdom. The civil war that erupts in the summer of 1606 is unlike anything Russia has seen before. This is not just a squabble between princes over who gets to wear the crown. Under the leadership of the former galley slave Ivan Bolotnikov, it becomes a vicious bottom-up social revolution. You are witnessing a class war in its most brutal form. Bolotnikov's army is a seething coalition of the disenfranchised. You see grim-faced Cossacks riding alongside bands of runaway serfs armed with pitchforks and axes, united with minor nobles from the southern provinces who feel ignored and exploited by the Moscow elite. Bolotnikov harnesses their rage with brilliant, terrifying propaganda. He issues proclamations that spread like fire through the countryside, calling on the lower classes to rise up. "Kill the boyars, your oppressors," his letters command. "Take their property, take their wealth, take their wives, rule in their place." This rhetoric is, understandably, not very popular with the landlord class, but for the millions of peasants living in bondage, it is a message of apocalyptic hope. Bolotnikov proves to be a formidable commander. His revolutionary army, fueled by a potent cocktail of social fury and the belief that they are fighting for the true Tsar Dmitry, sweeps north towards Moscow. They crush the armies Tsar Vasily Shuisky sends against them. The city of Kromy, which had been a bastion for the first false Dmitry, once again becomes a rebel stronghold. Shuisky's own brother is defeated in a battle near Kaluga. As Bolotnikov advances, his forces swell. Serfs murder their masters and flock to his banner. Entire garrisons defect. You can feel the panic rising in Moscow as this unstoppable tide of rebellion gets closer and closer. By October 1606 it has arrived. An army of tens of thousands of rebels surrounds the capital, and Tsar Vasily and his boyars are trapped. You are now a witness to the siege of Moscow. For 2 long, tense months, the fate of the nation hangs in the balance. Bolotnikov establishes his headquarters in the nearby village of Kolomenskoye, directing assaults against the city's formidable fortifications. From the city walls, you can see the campfires of the besieging army, a vast and terrifying arc of light in the autumn darkness. It's a war of psychology as much as of arms. Bolotnikov's men shout promises of liberation to the urban poor within the city, urging them to rise up and open the gates. Inside, Shuisky's government stages massive religious processions, with priests carrying the most sacred icons along the walls, branding Bolotnikov a heretic and an agent of Satan. But the rebellion's greatest strength is also its fatal weakness. The army is a sprawling, unstable coalition, a group project gone horribly wrong. It includes provincial nobles, like the Ryazan leader Prokopy Lyapunov, who joined the fight because they hated Shuisky, not because they wanted to see their own serfs seize their estates. As the siege drags on, these noble factions become increasingly alarmed by the radical, peasant-driven nature of the uprising. They had signed up for a political coup, not a social apocalypse that would threaten their own property values. Shuisky, the master of intrigue, expertly exploits this crack in the rebel alliance. He sends secret messages to Lyapunov and the other noble commanders, offering them a full pardon and a restoration of their ranks and privileges if they abandon Bolotnikov. The offer is too good to refuse. In a decisive act of betrayal, Lyapunov and his entire contingent of gentry cavalry suddenly switch sides during a battle, attacking their former comrades. The rebel army, caught by surprise and crippled by the defection of its most professional soldiers, collapses. Bolotnikov is soundly defeated outside Moscow in early December. He is forced to lift the siege and lead his remaining die-hard followers in a desperate retreat south to the city of Kaluga. Historians still argue whether the Bolotnikov rebellion was primarily a political struggle fought in Dmitry's name, or the first true large-scale class war in Russian history. For now, Shuisky has survived. Moscow is safe. But the civil war is far from over. Bolotnikov is cornered but not yet beaten, and the ghost he fights for, the miraculously saved Tsar Dmitry, has conspicuously failed to show up for the battle. This begs the question, if Bolotnikov is Dmitry's general, where on earth is Dmitry? While Tsar Vasily Shuisky has managed to save Moscow, the civil war continues to rage. The rebel leader, Ivan Bolotnikov, and his most loyal forces are now besieged in the southern fortress city of Tula. The siege lasts all summer long in 1607. Shuisky IS army can break through the city, SE strong walls, and Bolotnikov's men are determined to hold out until their true Tsar Dmitry arrives with reinforcements. But Dmitry, as usual, is a no-show. The siege is finally broken not by arms, but by a clever piece of 17th century engineering. On Shuisky's orders, his soldiers build a large dam across the Upa River, downstream from Tula. The river backs up, and the city begins to flood. The rising water ruins the rebels' food supplies and, crucially, their stores of gunpowder. Drowned and starving, Bolotnikov is forced to surrender in October. Shuisky gives his solemn promise that the rebels' lives will be spared. It's a promise he has no intention of keeping. The lesser rebels are executed or sold into slavery. Bolotnikov himself is taken north, blinded, and then unceremoniously drowned in an ice hole. It's a brutal end to the peasant revolution. With Bolotnikov dead, the rebellion should have died with him. It is now a headless monster. But the idea of the rebellion, the powerful, intoxicating myth of the rightful Tsar Dmitry, is still very much alive. The movement just needs a new head. It acts almost like a popular TV show that has just killed off its main character and is desperately looking to recast the role to keep the series going. And so, the search for a new Dmitry begins. Conveniently, one appears right on cue. In the summer of 1607, while Bolotnikov was still holding out in Tula, a mysterious new figure emerged in the border town of Starodub. His origins are even more obscure than his predecessors. He looks nothing at all like the first false Dmitry. Where the first was charismatic, well-spoken, and had an aristocratic bearing, this new man is described as coarse, brutish, and uneducated. He is a physical and social opposite. And yet, miraculously, a number of people who knew the first Dmitry intimately, including some of his Cossack commanders, take one look at this new guy and swear that it's him. The official story becomes that the terrible stress of escaping the Moscow massacre has drastically altered his appearance. It's a ludicrous explanation, but in the chaos of the times, people are willing to believe anything that gives them a banner to fight under. This second false Dmitry quickly becomes the new rallying point for everyone who opposes Tsar Vasily Shuisky. The scattered remnants of Bolotnikov's forces flock to him. He attracts thousands of Cossacks, disgruntled peasants, and a whole new wave of Polish and Lithuanian adventurers who see a fresh opportunity for profit and glory. With this new army, he marches on Moscow in the spring of 1608. He fails to take the city, but he does the next best thing. He establishes a huge fortified camp in the village of Tushino, just 7 miles northwest of the Kremlin. This Tushino camp is not just a military base. It becomes a rival capital, an alternative Russia. You watch as a shadow government springs up. The thief of Tushino, as he is contemptuously nicknamed in Moscow, establishes his own court, his own Boyar Duma, and his own state bureaucracy. He even appoints his own patriarch of the church, a high-ranking bishop named Filaret Romanov, whom Boris Godunov had exiled years before. It's the ultimate rival startup, setting up its headquarters right in the shadow of the main corporate office. Historians still argue about the psychology of the Tushinites. Were they cynical opportunists who knew the new Dmitry was a fraud? Or did they engage in a form of collective self-deception, willing him to be the real thing? The result is a situation of unprecedented absurdity. Russia is now a schizophrenic state. There is a Tsar in the Kremlin and a Tsar in Tushino. There are two governments, two armies, and two centers of power, each claiming to be the one true authority. The time of troubles has just reached a whole new level of bizarre. You are now trying to survive in a nation that has lost its mind. From 1608 to 1610, Russia is a kingdom with two heads. In the ancient Kremlin sits Tsar Vasily Shuisky, the Boyar Tsar, legitimate in the eyes of Moscow, but despised almost everywhere else. Just a few miles away in the sprawling, chaotic camp of Tushino sits the second false Dmitry, the thief of Tushino, a crude pretender who holds sway over vast swathes of the country. This dual power creates a political landscape of pure, cynical absurdity. You witness the rise of the Tushinsky Parality, or the Tushino floaters. These are boyars and nobles who have turned political allegiance into a career strategy. You might see a prince commanding one of Shuisky's regiments one week. The next, having been denied a promotion or feeling underpaid, he simply packs his bags, rides the 7 miles to Tushino, and offers his sword to Dmitry. If he grows dissatisfied there, he might just float back to Moscow. It's the 17th century's most flexible work-from-home arrangement, with treason as a negotiable benefit. This schizophrenia paralyzes the country. As a landowner or a provincial governor, you are caught in an impossible bind. A tax collector from Moscow arrives, demanding you pay your dues to Tsar Vasily. The next day, a band of armed Cossacks from Tushino shows up, demanding taxes for Tsar Dmitry. Who do you pay? Paying one makes you a traitor to the other, liable to have your estate burned to the ground. Paying neither makes you a target for both. Many hedge their bets and try to pay both sides, a ruinous policy that bleeds the countryside dry. The Tushino camp itself grows into a massive semi-permanent city of over 100,000 people, a bizarre collection of tents and crude huts housing Polish soldiers, Russian nobles, Cossacks, priests, merchants, and their families, all swirling around the court of a man no one really believes in. And then, the ultimate act of political theater occurs, a moment so cynical it borders on black comedy. The pretender in Tushino needs a Tsarina to complete his court, and it just so happens that Tsarina from the first act is available. Marina Mnishek, the widow of the first false Dmitry, is captured by Tushino forces on her way back to Poland. She is brought to the camp and a private meeting is arranged with the new Dmitry. You can only imagine the conversation. Here is the man pretending to be her husband, a man who looks and acts nothing like the man she actually married. And yet, a deal is struck. She agrees to recognize him. You are in the crowd at the Tushino camp when she is presented. With a straight face, she tearfully embraces this stranger as her miraculously saved husband. It is the most awkward and politically expedient family reunion in history. She knows he's a fake, he knows that she knows, and all the top commanders know they all know. But they proceed with the charade because it gives his claim a veneer of legitimacy. Back in the Kremlin, Tsar Vasily is desperate. His kingdom is shrinking, his capital is being strangled by the Tushino blockade, and his nobles are defecting daily. He realizes he cannot win this civil war on his own. He needs outside help. So he makes a fateful decision, sending envoys north to Russia's other great rival, Sweden. In early 1609, you learn of the Treaty of Viborg. Shuisky has made a deal with the devil. He has promised to cede Russian territory in the north to Sweden in exchange for an army of several thousand highly disciplined Swedish, German, and Scottish mercenaries under the command of General Jacob de Lagarde. It's a desperate call to international customer support, and it comes with a very high price. This move fundamentally changes the nature of the conflict. Shoisky has invited a foreign army onto Russian soil to fight Russians. Historians still argue whether Shoisky's alliance with Sweden was a necessary evil to save the state from collapse, or a catastrophic miscalculation that internationalized the conflict. One thing is certain. The King of Poland, Sigismund III, who has been unofficially supporting the Tushino pretender, cannot and will not tolerate a formal military alliance between his two greatest rivals, Sweden and Russia. Shoisky's desperate gamble to save his throne is about to give Poland the perfect excuse to stop playing games with proxies and launch a full-scale official invasion. The time of troubles is about to go international. You can feel the entire political landscape of Eastern Europe shift on its axis. King Sigismund III of Poland has been watching the chaos in Russia with keen interest, pulling strings from a distance, unofficially backing the pretenders. But Tsar Vasily Shoisky's formal military alliance with Sweden has crossed a red line. For Poland-Lithuania, a Russo-Swedish bloc is a geopolitical nightmare. Sigismund now has the perfect pretext to do what he likely wanted to do all along: intervene directly. He decides it's time to cut out the unreliable middleman and handle this Russian problem himself. His new goal is no longer just to destabilize Russia, but to conquer it, to place his own son Władysław on the throne of the Tsars and bring the vast Russian realm under Polish influence. In September of 1609, a formidable Polish-Lithuanian army, led by the king himself and his most brilliant general, Hetman Stanisław Żółkiewski, crosses the border. You immediately sense that this is different. This is not another ragtag collection of mercenaries and Cossacks following a dubious pretender. This is the professional, state-of-the-art army of a major European power. The air rings with the sound of their trumpets and the sight of their elite heavy cavalry. The legendary winged hussars, whose thunderous charge is one of the most feared military spectacles of the age. The Russian Civil War has just escalated into a full-blown international invasion. The first target is the massive fortress city of Smolensk, which sits on the main road to Moscow like a great stone gatekeeper. Sigismund expects a quick and easy victory, but the city's governor, Mikhail Shine, has other ideas. You are now inside the walls of Smolensk, part of a city that refuses to bow. Shane organizes a heroic, desperate, and astonishingly effective defense. The Polish army, for all its might, is stopped dead in its tracks. The siege of Smolensk will drag on for nearly 2 years, a bloody and grueling stalemate that ties up the Polish king and the bulk of his army. This direct Polish intervention has a catastrophic effect on the Tushino camp. The thousands of Polish soldiers who form the backbone of the second false Dmitry's army are, at the end of the day, loyal to their king and country. Seeing a better job offer with more reliable pay, they abandon the thief of Tushino in droves, riding off to join the king's army at Smolensk. Deprived of his military core, the Tushino pretender's authority evaporates. His sham capital collapses into infighting and chaos. In December 1609, the man who called himself Tsar Dmitry is forced to flee his own camp in disguise, eventually making his way to Kaluga. His shadow government is finished. Meanwhile, Shoisky's deal with the Swedes begins to pay dividends. The combined Russo-Swedish relief force, commanded by the Tsar's brilliant and popular 23-year-old nephew, Prince Mikhail Skopin-Shoisky, proves highly effective. Alongside the Swedish general Jacob de la Gardie, Skopin-Shoisky leads a successful campaign from the north, clearing Tushino loyalists from town after town. In March 1610, his army reaches Moscow, lifting the Tushino blockade and entering the city in triumph. You are in the streets, cheering wildly. Skopin-Shoisky is hailed as the savior of Russia. He is young, charismatic, and victorious. Everything his uncle, the Tsar, is not. For a fragile moment, you feel a flicker of hope. Perhaps this young hero can finally end the chaos and unite the country. But in the venomous, paranoid court of Tsar Vasily Shoisky, being too popular can be a fatal condition. The old Tsar sees his nephew's success not as a victory for his regime, but as a direct threat to his own power. Historians still argue whether King Sigismund's primary goal was to place his son on the Russian throne, or to permanently weaken Russia by annexing key territories like Smolensk. But in Moscow, a more intimate and petty drama is unfolding. The nation's best general has just learned that in the Shoisky family, Success is a dangerous thing to have. The flicker of hope is about to be violently extinguished. The flicker of hope that arrived with Mikhail Skopin-Shuisky does not last long. In the poisonous atmosphere of his uncle's court, the young general's popularity is a death sentence. In April 1610, a feast is held to celebrate his victories. You are there, in the gilded hall, watching as the hero of the nation is toasted. The wife of the Tsar's brother, the notoriously incompetent and widely despised Dmitry Shuisky, offers the young prince a cup of wine. He drinks it. A short time later, he falls violently ill. Blood pours from his nose and mouth, and after 2 weeks of agony, Russia's brightest military star is dead at the age of 23. It was the worst welcome home party imaginable. While poisoning is never officially proven, no one in Moscow has any doubt. The Tsar's own family has murdered the one man who could have saved them, all out of petty jealousy. With the hero gone, the task of relieving the siege of Smolensk still remains. A large army is assembled, combining the Russian forces with the thousands of Swedish and European mercenaries under Jakub de la Gardie. And who does Tsar Vasily appoint to command this crucial nation-saving expedition? His brother, Dmitry Shuisky, the very man everyone assumes just had his nephew murdered. It's a decision that reeks of nepotism and incompetence, a classic case of failing upwards. You can feel the morale of the army plummet as this loathsome, untalented commander takes charge. The Russo-Swedish army, some 30,000 strong, begins its slow march west. The Polish general besieging Smolensk, the brilliant hetman Stanisław Żółkiewski, learns of their approach. He is outnumbered more than 4-1, but he makes an incredibly bold decision. Leaving a skeleton force to keep the Smolensk garrison pinned down, he takes the elite of his army, just under 7,000 men, but including the cream of the Polish cavalry, and marches through the night to meet the enemy head-on. On July 4th, 1610, near the village of Klushino, the two armies clash. You are now standing on the battlefield, witnessing a masterclass in military genius on one side and a textbook example of incompetence on the other. Dmitry Shuisky deploys his massive army in a clumsy, constricted position. He foolishly pens in his own cavalry behind a wooden fence, rendering them useless. From the Polish lines, Żółkiewski sees his opponent's errors and prepares to exploit them. The battle begins, and it is decided by one of the most legendary military units of the era, the Winged Hussars. You hear a low rumble that builds into a terrifying roar as they begin their charge. They are a vision from a nightmare. Heavily armored riders with huge feathered wings arching from their backs, designed to create a deafening, inhuman shriek as they ride. They crash into the Russian lines not once, not twice, but in 8 to 10 successive, devastating waves, their long lances shattering infantry formations and routing the Russian cavalry. As if this weren't bad enough, the European mercenaries on the Russian side, seeing the battle is lost and having no love for their commander, decide to renegotiate their contracts mid-fight. Żółkiewski makes them a better offer, back pay and a position in his army. The mercenaries agree, turn their cannons and muskets around, and open fire on their former Russian allies. The Russian army, attacked from the front by hussars and from the flank by their own supposed allies, completely disintegrates. The Battle of Klushino becomes a catastrophic rout. Dmitry Shuisky flees the field in such a panic that he loses his horse and his commander Wayne's baton. Historians still argue whether the defeat at Klushino was due to the tactical genius of Żółkiewski and the superiority of the Winged Hussars, or the almost criminal incompetence of the Russian commander, Dmitry Shuisky. The result, however, is not in dispute. The last major Russian field army has ceased to exist. The road to Moscow is now completely, terrifyingly open. The news of the Klushino disaster hits Moscow like a physical blow. When the disgraced commander Dmitry Shuisky and the few survivors of his shattered army straggle back into the city, they bring not just news of defeat, but the certainty of doom. The last army is gone. A victorious Polish force is marching on the capital. Tsar Vasily Shuisky, a ruler who came to power through a coup and held it through a bloody civil war, now has no cards left to play. His authority, already threadbare, disintegrates completely. You can feel the city turning on him. The boyars who once supported him now looking for a way to cut their losses and save their own skins. In July 1610, the end comes swiftly. There is no bloody mob this time, just a cold, clinical political execution. A group of leading boyars, led by the Lyapunov family, marches to the Kremlin and confronts the Tsar. They inform him that he is no longer fit to rule. He is deposed. To ensure he can never again make a claim to power, they subject him to the ultimate political neutralization. He is forcibly tonsured as a monk. You watch as the boyar Tsar, the cunning old schemer, is stripped of his finery, his hair and beard are shorn, and he is hustled off to a monastery. It's a quiet, humiliating end to a disastrous reign. Once again, the throne is empty. A power vacuum opens up in the heart of the kingdom, and this time, a committee steps in to fill it. A council of the 7 most powerful nobles takes control of the government. History will remember them as the Semi-Boyarshchina, the rule of the 7 boyars. You now find yourself living in a capital city run by the worst homeowners association imaginable. A group of aristocrats whose primary goal is to protect their own privileged positions from the chaos closing in on all sides. And they are facing 2 immediate existential threats. Outside one wall of the city is the victorious Polish army, led by the formidable Hetman Jokiewski, and outside another wall is the second false Dmitry, who, smelling blood, has marched his own chaotic army up from the south, ready to finally claim his prize. The 7 boyars are trapped between a rock and a hard place, between a foreign invader and a domestic revolutionary. For them, the choice is surprisingly easy. The thief of Tushino and his horde of Cossacks and runaway serfs represent social anarchy, the destruction of their entire world. He is the ultimate evil. Hetman Jokiewski, on the other hand, is a fellow aristocrat. He is a man of order, discipline, and most importantly, a man they can negotiate with. He presents himself not as a conqueror, but as a peacemaker. And so the boyars make a decision that will echo in infamy for centuries. They enter into negotiations with Jokiewski and agree to a radical solution. They will offer the Russian crown to Władysław, the 15-year-old son of the Polish king Sigismund. But a new Tsar needs a secure capital, and so to protect Moscow from the forces of the pretender and to maintain order during the transition, the 7 boyars agree to the unthinkable. They agree to let the Polish army into the city. In the autumn of 1610, you watch aghast as the city gates are swung open. The Polish troops, the very men who had slaughtered the Russian army at Klushino, march into Moscow without a single shot being fired. They take control of the Kremlin, the armories, and all the key positions. They have been invited in like a very, very heavily armed security service. Historians still argue whether the 7 boyars' decision to invite in the Poles was a treacherous act of national betrayal or a pragmatic choice to save Moscow from the greater threat of social collapse under the second pretender. Whatever the motive, the result is the same. The capital of Orthodox Russia is now an occupied city, its government a puppet, its heart in the hands of its Catholic enemies. With Polish troops now patrolling the streets of your capital, the 7 boyars move quickly to formalize the arrangement that they hope will save their skins and their country. You are now a fly on the wall during the tense negotiations between the Boyar Council and the Polish commander, Hetman Jokiewski. The result is the Treaty of August 1610, a document that represents a desperate attempt to build a stable house on the shakiest of foundations. The centerpiece of the deal is the election of Władysław Wasa, the 15-year-old son of Poland's King Sigismund III, as the new Tsar of all Russia. On paper, it creates a powerful personal union between 2 great Slavic empires. But the boyars, led by the powerful Prince Mstislavski, are not naive. They include a detailed list of conditions, a sort of prenup for a kingdom. First and foremost, the absolute, non-negotiable condition. Before he can be crowned, Prince Władysław must convert to the Orthodox faith. The boyars can stomach a foreign Tsar, but they and the powerful Russian Church will never accept a Catholic heretic on the throne. Other conditions follow. Władysław must agree to marry a Russian noblewoman, uphold the laws and traditions of the Tsardom, and respect the privileges of the boyars, promising not to harm them or seize their property without a fair trial. The treaty explicitly states that while allied, Russia and the Polish-Lithuanian Commonwealth will remain two distinct and separate states. Żółkiewski, a pragmatist who wants to secure his victory and pacify the country, agrees to all the terms on behalf of his king. For a fleeting moment, a strange and fragile hope settles over Moscow. The people of the city are even led to the cathedrals to swear a formal oath of allegiance to their new, unseen sovereign, Tsar Władysław II. Perhaps this is the way out. Perhaps the troubles are finally over. To finalize the deal, a great embassy of Russian nobles and church leaders, including the influential Filaret Romanov, travels to the Polish military camp outside the besieged city of Smolensk, where King Sigismund III is personally overseeing the siege. They arrive expecting to greet their new king and ratify the treaty. Instead, they run headlong into a wall of royal ambition and religious zealotry. King Sigismund is not the pragmatist his general is. He is a devout, almost fanatical Catholic with a deep-seated hatred of the Orthodox faith. And he has a grander vision. He listens to the terms of the treaty his general has signed and flatly rejects the most important one. He will never, under any circumstances, allow his son to abandon the true Catholic faith and convert to the schismatic Orthodox rite. Instead, he offers a counter-proposal. He should be the one to rule Russia as a regent for his son, and he will rule as a Catholic. His goal is not partnership, it is subjugation. The Russian ambassadors are horrified. This is not the deal they made. This is a demand for unconditional surrender. Patriarch Hermogenes in Moscow, when he hears the news, is furious and unbending. An Orthodox Tsar, or no Tsar at all. The ambassadors at Smolensk refuse the king's new terms. Sigismund, enraged by their defiance, ends the negotiations by having the entire Russian embassy, including Filaret, arrested and carted off to prison in Poland. Back in Moscow, the arrangement begins to rot from the inside. Hetman Żółkiewski, the one man who commanded respect, departs, leaving the Polish garrison under the command of harsher, less diplomatic officers. The Polish soldiers, whose good behavior warranty seems to have expired, start treating the city as their personal property. You see them openly mock religious processions, steal from market stalls, and harass the citizens. The saviors are now acting like occupiers. Historians still argue whether Sigismund III's refusal to let his son convert was a matter of sincere religious principle or a calculated political move to sabotage a treaty he felt was too generous to the Russians. Whatever the reason, his actions have turned a potential solution into a disaster. The boyar's clever deal has been exposed as a fraud, and a new, dangerous feeling is beginning to stir in the occupied city. A slow-burning, patriotic rage. The boyar's deal with the Poles has turned into a national humiliation. With the collaborating government in Moscow utterly discredited and King Sigismund's treachery revealed, the leadership of the nation passes to the only institution with any moral authority left, the Russian Orthodox Church. You see this moral resistance centered in one man, the aged and unbending Patriarch Hermogenes. Though the Poles place him under house arrest within the Kremlin, they cannot silence him. He begins a work-from-prison campaign that will change the course of the war. He writes fiery, patriotic epistles, which are secretly smuggled out of the Kremlin and copied and distributed by loyal priests and monks across the land. You get your hands on one of these forbidden letters. Its message is a thunderclap. It condemns the boyars as traitors, the Poles as heretics, and King Sigismund as an enemy of Christ. It formally releases all Russians from the oath they swore to Prince Władysław, declaring the contract null and void. It is a call to holy war, a plea for the people of Russia to rise up as one, form a national army, and march on Moscow to save the Orthodox faith from the Latin invaders. This call from the nation's spiritual father finds fertile ground. In the early months of 1611, a great national militia, the First Volunteer Army, begins to take shape. It is a broad, unwieldy, and deeply unstable coalition, a new group project with all the warning signs of failure. You see the disparate factions coming together. From the city of Ryazan comes the gentry, the landowners and professional soldiers, led by Prokopy Lyapunov, the same nobleman who had a famously flexible relationship with the Bolotnikov rebellion. From the south and the remnants of the Tushino camp come the Cossacks, a wild and formidable fighting force led by Prince Dmitry Trubetskoy. These two groups are the heart of the army, and they despise each other. The nobles see the Cossacks as lawless anarchists, and the Cossacks see the nobles as the very oppressors they have been fighting for years. For now, a shared hatred of the Poles holds this fragile alliance together. As this new army, tens of thousands strong, advances on Moscow, the city's inhabitants can wait no longer. In March 1611, a furious popular uprising erupts within the occupied capital. You are swept up in the chaos as citizens erect barricades in the narrow streets and attack the Polish garrison with axes, knives, and boiling water. The fighting is brutal and desperate. The Polish commander, seeing his troops are outnumbered and at risk of being trapped, makes a horrific decision. To suppress the rebellion and clear the streets, he orders his men to set fire to the city. A terrible firestorm, a uniquely Russian method of urban renewal, engulfs the vast, predominantly wooden suburbs of Moscow. Thousands of civilians are burned alive or cut down as they flee. The city is turned into a smoldering ruin. Into this apocalyptic landscape arrives the First Volunteer Army. They manage to drive the Polish garrison from the burning wreckage of the outer city, trapping them inside the powerful stone fortifications of the Kremlin and the central district known as Kitaygorod. A long siege begins. But as the months drag on, the deep cracks in the militia's leadership crack wide open. Lyapunov tries to establish order, creating a provisional government and attempting to rein in the Cossacks, who are more interested in looting than in disciplined siege warfare. The final straw comes when Lyapunov passes a decree limiting the Cossacks' rights and powers. The Cossack leaders, feeling betrayed, summon Lyapunov to their camp to negotiate. It is a trap. They accuse him of being a traitor, and in a fit of rage, a Cossack chieftain cuts him down, killing him on the spot. Historians still argue whether the First Volunteer Army failed because of its deep-seated class divisions or because of the personal ambitions and mutual distrust of its leaders, Lyapunov and Trubetskoy. With Lyapunov's murder, the gentry forces are horrified. They abandon the siege and go home. The First Volunteer Army dissolves in a pathetic spectacle of infighting and murder. The first great national effort to save Russia has failed. You are now in the autumn of 1611, and Russia has hit rock bottom. The first national militia has collapsed in a pathetic round of assassinations and infighting. Moscow is a smoldering ruin, its Kremlin occupied by a Polish garrison. The great fortress of Smolensk has finally fallen to King Sigismund's army after a heroic 2-year siege. The former Tsar, Vasily Shuisky, is a captive, paraded through Warsaw as a trophy. Patriarch Hermogenes is starving to death in a Kremlin dungeon. To top it all off, a third false Dmitry has popped up in the city of Pskov. The nation is not just broken, it is a corpse being picked over by vultures. It seems that all is lost. But in the wealthy merchant city of Nizhny Novgorod on the Volga River, a city so far spared the worst of the devastation, a final desperate spark of resistance is about to be struck. The catalyst is not a great prince or a famous general, but a commoner. His name is Kuzma Minin. He is a respected butcher or merchant in the city, the elder of his guild. Historians still argue about the precise social standing of Kuzma Minin, with some sources calling him a simple butcher and others a wealthy merchant. But all agree his role as a civic organizer was unprecedented for a commoner. You are in the main square of the Nizhny Novgorod Kremlin when Minin stands before the assembled citizens and delivers one of the most famous speeches in Russian history. His voice rings with passion and patriotism. He tells the people that the motherland is perishing, but that they can save it. He calls on them to give everything they have to fund a new army, a second volunteer army. We must not spare our property, our lives, he cries. He proposes that every citizen contribute 1/5 of their wealth. Those who have nothing, he says, should sell their property, even their wives and children, to raise the necessary funds. It is the most intense and brutally effective fundraising drive in history. His speech ignites a fire of patriotic fervor. The citizens of Nizhny Novgorod agree. The money begins to pour in, but an army needs more than money. It needs a leader, a military commander who is both skilled and crucially trustworthy, a man untainted by the treachery and self-interest that has poisoned the Russian elite. The choice falls upon Prince Dmitry Pozharsky. He is a veteran commander from an ancient noble line, known for his bravery and integrity. He had fought bravely against the Poles during the Moscow uprising and was now recovering from serious wounds at his nearby family estate. You are part of the delegation that goes to his estate to offer him command. At first, Pozharsky refuses. He is still unwell, and he is deeply wary of another disorganized, politically divided militia like the first one. He agrees to accept the command only on one groundbreaking condition: that the commoner, Kuzma Minin, be given total control over the army's treasury and supplies. Pozharsky insisted on having a competent and trusted chief financial officer. This creates an unprecedented and brilliant partnership. Pozharsky, the aristocrat, will have absolute military command. Minin, the butcher, will have absolute logistical and financial command. It is a structure designed specifically to avoid the infighting and corruption that had doomed the First Army. This is Russia's national revival, version 2.0, with the critical bugs fixed. With this dual leadership in place, the Second Volunteer Army begins to form. It is a more professional, better organized, and far better funded enterprise than its predecessor. Minin's ruthless taxation and Pozharsky's sterling reputation attract support from across the lands not under Polish or Cossack control. Other cities send money and men. Experienced soldiers, disgusted with the chaos elsewhere, flock to their banner. You witness a slow, deliberate, and methodical process. This is not a chaotic popular uprising. It is the careful, painstaking construction of a national salvation machine by an unlikely duo, a prince and a commoner, united by a single, desperate goal. Their long march to Moscow and to destiny is about to begin. With their leadership established and their war chest growing, Minin and Pozharsky begin their great task. In the spring of 1612, the Second Volunteer Army marches out of Nizhny Novgorod. But if you're expecting a dramatic, headlong dash to liberate the capital, you are mistaken. Prince Pozharsky is a cautious and methodical commander. He has seen firsthand how undisciplined haste destroyed the first militia. His strategy is the complete opposite of the Silicon Valley mantra, to move fast and break things. His is to move slowly and fix things. You are now part of this deliberate, grinding advance, and you realize the army is not even marching towards Moscow. Instead, you are heading northeast, up the Great Volga River. The strategy is brilliant. This route takes the army through the wealthy and populous merchant towns of the Upper Volga, regions that have been largely spared the devastation of the war. At each city, you are welcomed as heroes. More importantly, each stop is a recruiting drive and a fundraiser. Minin's treasury swells and Pozharsky's ranks fill with fresh, motivated soldiers. This slow march is not a sign of weakness. It is an act of state-building on the move. They are gathering the scattered, healthy limbs of Russia and reassembling them into a functioning body. In April, the army reaches the great city of Yaroslavl, and there, you stop. For 4 long months, from April to July 1612, Yaroslavl becomes the de facto capital of all free Russia. You witness an incredible feat of organization. Pozharsky and Minin establish a provisional government, the Council of the Whole Land, which is probably the most functional government Russia has had in a decade. They create government departments, dispense justice, and even set up a mint to issue new coins to pay their soldiers. You see the raw peasant and artisan recruits being drilled relentlessly in the fields outside the city, forged from a mob into a disciplined military force. During this time, Pozharsky plays a careful game of politics. He knows the remnants of the first militia, mostly Cossacks under Prince Trubetskoy, are still camped in the ruins outside Moscow. They are a wild card, a potential ally, but also a potential source of anarchy. Pozharsky communicates with them, but keeps his new disciplined army separate, refusing to merge his forces with theirs. He also has to deal with the latest impostor, the third false Dmitry, who has gained a following in the northwest. Pozharsky's council dispatches agents who successfully expose the man as a fraud, leading to his unfortunate and fatal performance review at the hands of his own followers. It's a masterful political move that neutralizes a threat without firing a shot. Historians still argue about Pozharsky's slow advance. Was it a stroke of strategic genius? allowing him to build an unbeatable force, or a sign of excessive caution that prolonged the country's suffering. But by late July 1612, the results are clear. The army is ready. It is well paid, well supplied, well trained, and its leaders have the legitimacy of a functioning government behind them. The time for preparation is over. The long march from Yaroslavl to Moscow finally begins. You march with a sense of grim purpose. This is not the chaotic revolutionary fervor that drove Bolotnikov's rebellion, nor the fragile, hate-fueled alliance of the First Militia. This feels like a professional endeavor. This is Russia's last chance. In late August, you arrive. Your army takes up positions on the western outskirts of Moscow. You can see the burned-out ruins of the suburbs, a testament to the failed uprising of the previous year. And in the center of it all, you see the goal. The high red brick walls of the Kremlin, with the foreign banners of Poland flying from its towers. The Polish garrison is trapped inside, but you also receive grim news. A large Polish relief army under the command of the great Lithuanian hetman Jan Karol Chodkiewicz is just days away. The final battle for Moscow is about to begin. You've marched across half of Russia, and now the moment of truth has arrived. It is late August 1612. Your new national army, under Prince Pozharsky, holds the western suburbs of Moscow. Across the city, in the east, are the Cossack forces of Prince Trubetskoy, your reluctant and unreliable allies. And in the center, inside the stone fortress of the Kremlin, is the starving Polish garrison. The air is thick with anticipation. Then, you see them. On the horizon, the banners of the Polish-Lithuanian Commonwealth appear. The relief army has arrived. It is led by Jan Karol Chodkiewicz, one of the most renowned military commanders of the age. He has come with thousands of elite troops and, most importantly, a massive train of supply wagons, a lifeline for the besieged garrison. His task is simple: break your lines and get those wagons into the Kremlin. Your task is simpler: stop him, or everything you have fought for will be lost. The battle for Moscow begins on August 22nd. You are positioned in a fortified line near the Arbat Street, and you watch as Chodkiewicz's professional soldiers launch a furious assault. The world dissolves into a nightmare of smoke, noise, and terror. The air is thick with the acrid smell of gunpowder. Polish artillery pounds your positions, and their infantry, a mix of Hungarian and German mercenaries, advances with terrifying discipline. The fighting is hand-to-hand, a desperate, brutal struggle in the ditches and behind crude earthen ramparts. Pozharsky is everywhere, a calm and steady presence, directing the defense. By the end of the day, your lines have held, but just barely. You have taken heavy losses and you look to the east for help, but none has come. The Cossacks, still nursing their old grudges, have spent the entire day watching the battle from their camp, refusing to join. They were waiting to see who would win before committing. The situation is dire. Chodkiewicz rests his troops and prepares for a final, decisive blow on the 24th. He plans to strike at the heart of your position. But now, the other half of Russia's leading duo steps forward. This is Kuzma Minin's moment. He is not a general. He is the man who manages the money. But he sees that the battle is being lost for lack of will. He rides to the Cossack camp and delivers a desperate, impassioned plea to Prince Trubetskoy. He begs them, in the name of God and Russia, to join the fight. Then he does something extraordinary. He personally takes command of a small reserve force of a few hundred cavalry. He leads them across the Moskva River, and at the critical moment when the main Polish assault begins, he launches a shocking, almost suicidal charge directly into the flank of an elite Polish cavalry squadron. It is not a huge attack, but its timing and audacity are perfect. The Poles, stunned by an attack from an unexpected direction, are thrown into confusion. Historians still argue about the exact nature of Minin's famous charge. Was he a true tactical leader in that moment, or more of a charismatic figurehead whose personal bravery inspired others to act? Whatever the case, it works. Pozharsky's main force, seeing Minin's incredible courage, is inspired to launch a ferocious counterattack. And finally, shamed and inspired into action, the Cossacks move. A great horde of thousands of Trubetskoy's warriors thunders into the rear of Chodkiewiczen's army. The Polish relief force, which had been on the verge of victory, is now caught in a massive vice. You are now part of a great, unified Russian charge, pushing forward with the Cossacks at your side. The professional Polish army, attacked from all sides, breaks. Chodkiewicz, a commander who has rarely known defeat, is forced into a humiliating retreat. His army is shattered and his precious supply train is captured. The last hope of the Polish garrison is gone. As you stand, exhausted and blood-spattered on the battlefield, you know you have just witnessed the turning point. The Polish relief force will not be coming back. The garrison in the Kremlin is now utterly, completely, and hopelessly alone. The victory is absolute, but the war for the city is not quite over. With the relief army gone, you are now part of a unified Russian force that draws a tight, inescapable noose around the Polish garrison and their Russian collaborators trapped within the Kremlin and the adjacent Kitaygorod district. The siege, which had been a standoff, now becomes a death watch. As the autumn of 1612 deepens, you watch the ancient fortress, waiting for the inevitable outcome. There is no hope of rescue for those inside. There is only starvation. Inside the walls, a scene of unimaginable horror unfolds. The thousands of Polish soldiers and the collaborating boyars have long since run out of proper food. You hear the stories from the occasional skeletal deserter who manages to slip over the walls in the dead of night. First, they ate the horses, then the stray dogs and cats, then the rats and crows. Then they boiled the leather of their belts, boots, and scabbards into a foul, gelatinous slime. Their diet became increasingly unconventional, and finally, with nothing left, they turned on each other. The ultimate taboo was broken. The garrison was consumed by cannibalism, a final, ghastly symptom of a nation that had been eating itself alive for years. By late October, the end is near. The Polish commanders, seeing their proud soldiers reduced to ghoulish specters, finally sue for peace. They send a messenger to Prince Pozharsky, asking for terms of surrender. Pozharsky, an honorable man, offers to spare their lives if they lay down their arms. This promise, however, is not endorsed by all. The Cossacks, who make up a huge portion of the besieging army, have not forgotten the years of bloodshed and Polish arrogance. They have not read the memo on prisoners' rights and are baying for a massacre. On October 26, 1612, the great gates of the Kremlin creak open. You stand in stunned silence as the defenders of the fortress surrender. It is not a proud army that marches out, but a procession of ghosts. You see men who are little more than walking skeletons, their faces gaunt, their eyes hollow with a despair that is beyond comprehension. They are so weak they can barely carry their own muskets. Among them are the great boyars of the Semi-Boyarshchina, the collaborators, their fine silk robes hanging loosely on their emaciated frames. They made a calculated political gamble and chose the losing side, a mistake for which they will be forever shamed. Pozharsky and his men try to maintain order and protect the prisoners as promised, but the chaos and hatred are too great. The Cossacks, in a fury, fall upon some of the columns of prisoners, cutting them down in a bloody, vengeful slaughter. Historians still argue how much control Pozharsky had over the Cossacks and whether he could have prevented the massacre of the surrendered Polish prisoners. It is a brutal, messy end to a brutal, messy siege, but it is the end. You are among the first Russian soldiers to re-enter the Kremlin. You see the holiest cathedrals of your faith, which had been used by the occupiers as stables and storehouses, now liberated. The Polish banners are torn from the towers. A soldier climbs the Ivan the Great bell tower, and for the first time in 2 years, its great bells ring out not in alarm but in triumph. Moscow is free. The heart of Russia is beating again. The foreign occupiers have been expelled. The pretenders are gone. But the throne is still empty and the country is a ruin. The fighting is over, but the hardest task, rebuilding a nation from the ashes, has just begun. You stand in the liberated but deeply wounded city of Moscow. The Polish occupiers are gone, but the task ahead is monumental. The country is a patchwork of devastation. The treasury is empty, and the throne of the Tsars sits vacant. The military leaders of the national revival, Prince Pozharsky and Kuzma Minin are heroes, but they are not Tsars. They understand that their authority is temporary. To prevent Russia from shattering once more into warring factions, a new legitimate ruler must be chosen by the entire nation. And so in the winter of 1612, writs are sent out across the land, calling for delegates from every class and every free city to gather in Moscow for the most important Zemsky Sobor, the great assembly of the land, in Russian history. You are one of those delegates, chosen to represent your town in this ultimate post-apocalyptic town hall meeting. You arrive in Moscow to a scene of solemn purpose. The city is still scarred. The signs of fire and battle are everywhere, but it is filled with people from every corner of the vast Russian territory. You see powerful bearded boyars in their fur-trimmed coats, high-ranking churchmen in their black robes, rugged provincial gentry, wealthy merchants, and even elected representatives from the Cossack hosts and the free peasantry. Over 700 delegates in all, gathering for weeks of intense, fractious debate in the great Dormition Cathedral within the Kremlin. The goal is one, but the paths to it are many. The assembly quickly divides into factions, each with its own candidate for the throne. You move through the tense backroom negotiations, listening to the arguments. One faction, composed of some of the highest-ranking boyars, argues for a foreign prince. A Polish or Swedish candidate, they claim, would stand above the petty rivalries of the Russian clans. But this idea is shouted down. The patriotic and religious fervor is running too high. The memory of the occupation is too raw. The cry is for a Russian Tsar, an Orthodox Tsar. Then the great native princes, the Golitsins, the Mstislavskis, even the hero Pozharsky himself are considered. But each carries too much baggage. Their resumes are filled with red flags. They are too powerful, have too many rivals, or in the case of the Moscow boyars, are tainted by their past collaborations with the Poles. Slowly, a consensus begins to form around a compromise candidate. A name that is not on anyone's initial list, Mikhail Romanov. You consider his qualifications. He is a boy of 16. He is not a warrior. He has zero political experience. He is not even in Moscow. And yet, he is perfect. His youth is an asset. He is too young to have made powerful enemies. His personal record is a blank slate, but his family connections are impeccable. His great-aunt was Anastasia, the beloved first wife of Ivan the Terrible, providing a crucial albeit tenuous link back to the old Rurikid dynasty. And his father, the revered churchman Filaret Romanov, is currently a prisoner in Poland, a national martyr for having defied the Polish king. He is, in short, the ideal compromise. The boyars support him because they believe a weak, inexperienced boy will be easy for them to control. The Cossacks support him because his father had been their nominal patriarch in the Tushino camp. He is the one candidate who offends no one. Historians still argue about the unanimity of Mikhail's election, debating whether it was a genuine national consensus or the result of intense pressure from the powerful Cossack and Romanov factions. But on February 21, 1613, the debate ends. The Zemsky Sobor formally and officially proclaims the 16-year-old Mikhail Fyodorovich Romanov the new Tsar of all Russia. A new dynasty has been chosen to lead the nation out of the darkness. The only problem is the new Tsar has no idea. He is hundreds of miles away, hiding with his mother in a remote monastery, and a grand delegation must now be sent to find him and persuade him to accept the broken crown. A new Tsar has been named, but he is a 16-year-old boy hundreds of miles away, completely unaware of his new and terrible honor. In early spring of 1613, you join a vast and solemn procession leaving Moscow. It is the great embassy of the Zemsky Sobor, a collection of the highest-ranking clergy, boyars, and gentry, sent to find the chosen one and formally offer him the crown. The journey itself is a stark reminder that the troubles are not yet over. You travel with a heavy military guard, as the countryside is still infested with rogue Cossack bands and leaderless Polish detachments who have turned to banditry. There is a Tsar in name, but not yet in fact. Your destination is the massive Ipatiev monastery near the city of Kostroma. It is here that the young Mikhail Romanov and his mother, the formidable nun Marfa, have taken refuge. You watch as the great procession arrives at the monastery walls. a delegation representing the entire Russian land, come to beg a teenage boy to be their king. They are ushered into the main hall where they come before Mikhail and his mother. The boy is timid and overwhelmed. His mother is not. The Archbishop of Ryazan steps forward, bows low, and explains that the will of God in the entire land has chosen Mikhail to be the new Tsar. He implores them to accept. And then, in a moment of high drama, they refuse. The boy Mikhail just weeps, but his mother, Marfa, speaks for them both. You hear the terror and grief in her voice as she passionately objects. She recounts the recent history of Russia as a catalogue of disasters. "Look what has become of the Tsars," she cries. "Boris Godunov was driven to ruin. The Pretender was torn to pieces. The Boyars are treacherous vipers, constantly shifting their loyalties. The kingdom is utterly destroyed. How could she, a loving mother, send her gentle and inexperienced son to sit on such a blood-soaked and precarious throne? It is not an offer of a crown, but a death sentence." For 6 hours, the delegation pleads. They weep, they get on their knees. They argue that this is not a matter of choice, but of divine duty. To refuse, they insist, is to commit a mortal sin, to abandon the Orthodox faith and the Russian land to final destruction. The final, immense pressure is brought to bear when the Archbishop presents them with a holy icon of the Virgin Mary, declaring that if they refuse this sacred charge, they will answer to God himself for the nation's collapse. The weight is too much to bear. Overwhelmed, exhausted, and weeping, the boy Mikhail finally whispers his consent. He is not a conquering hero, but a sacrifice, reluctantly accepting a crown he never wanted, to save a country he barely knows. Historians still argue whether Mikhail's and his mother's famous refusal was a genuine expression of fear or a piece of carefully staged political theater designed to absolve them of any ambition and place the full responsibility for the reign on the Zemsky Sobor. A few months later, in July 1613, you stand in the Dormition Cathedral in Moscow. You watch as the same Monomax cap that was worn by Ivan the Terrible is placed on the head of this trembling 16-year-old boy. The great bells of the Kremlin ring out, and this time, the sound is one of fragile, exhausted hope. The time of troubles is over. The long 15-year national nightmare has ended. A new dynasty, the Romanovs, has begun, destined to rule for the next 300 years, right up to the dawn of the modern age. And so, our long journey through the smoke and ice of Russia's darkest age comes to a close. The clamor of the coronation bells begins to fade, receding into the quiet of the night that now surrounds you. The faces of the many Tsars, the schemers and the saints, the pretenders and the patriots, all blur and dissolve back into the pages of history. You have walked through a land scoured by a famine born of a distant volcano, a nation torn apart by civil war and haunted by the ghosts of murdered princes. You have stood in the ashes of a burning Moscow and witnessed the desperate, heroic, and sometimes treacherous struggle of a people trying to save themselves from utter annihilation. But that chaotic world is far away now. The echoes of battle have gone silent, replaced by the soft hum of the fan in your own peaceful room. The profound uncertainty that gripped a whole nation has given way to the simple certainty of your own comfort and safety. Let the weight of the past drift away, leaving behind only the gentle cadence of the story as you ease further into your own quiet.